what's up? This is Patrick. Welcome to episode 19 of the Double ETF podcast, Everything Except the Football. I hope you guys are doing great. Today, I talk with Mike Siegel, comedian, traveler extraordinaire, and the host of the Travel Tales podcast. We covered a ton of topics, sports, travel, of course, a couple of other things, and give it a good listen. It's a really good one. And also, we had a new donation. Thank you, Nick, for your contribution. It's really appreciated. If you want to be awesome like Nick, like Kevin, like Josh, like Carly, you can do so. PayPal.me/EETFpod. Thank you. And also, you can drop us a review, iTunes or elsewhere. You can drop us a line at EETFpod on Twitter or EETFpod@gmail.com. That's it for now, and without further ado, here is part one of my conversation with Mike Siegel. Thanks. All right, so with me today, I have the pleasure of welcoming out of LA, Mike Siegel. How are you, sir?
Good. Bonjour, Monsieur Dupuis.
Oh, bonjour, Monsieur Siegel. Ça va bien?
Oui, ça va bien.
Ah, super.
Is that good?
Oh, perfect.
See,
perfect.
you know my 2 years of high school French. That's as far as I can get.
You never know when it's going to be useful, you know?
Yeah, no, I know. When I travel, I got to say, it just you forget how much is back there in your brain until you have to use it.
Yes. But I suspect living in LA and all that, your Spanish is probably much better.
Yeah, I had 2 years I switched to Spanish in college, and I found that to be much more useful in America and certainly
Yes.
certainly in the Americas, South America and Central. Yeah. But living here, I'm technically in LA County. I'm a minority.
Oh, really?
According to the last census. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, it is majority Latino.
Okay.
I think in the last couple censuses, at least in Los Angeles County.
Huh. Is it the only county in that situation?
Well, it's huge. I mean, it encompasses all of Los Angeles, and it goes inland, and the Inland Empire, which is, I mean, it's a lot of ground so it borders, like Ventura County would be in the north, and then Orange County in the south. But I mean, they're pretty densely populated. I mean, it's probably, I don't know, anywhere from 10 to 15 million people in the county. So
Jesus.
Yeah. People forget how populated California is. I mean, I think we have over 30 million people.
Oh my God, it's almost as much as Canada.
Yeah.
I think we are up to maybe 36 now or something like that. But anyway, yeah, we are sidetracked right off the bat. First of all, welcome and thank you for taking the time to be here today.
My pleasure. I feel in great company. People like Murray Valeriano involved. Has Pat Francis done this?
Yes.
Too?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And all my guests have been excellent, and you are no exception.
Well, you say that now. We haven't started yet. So, let's keep up that good attitude while this goes on.
Yes.
You never know how it goes. But I know you through the Rock Solid podcast as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll ask the usual open-ended question. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Well, I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois. I grew up there and started my comedy career there. Back in a time we call the 90s, Patrick. You were just a young lad. And that's where I first met Pat, actually. We were comedians together in Chicago, and we were actually roommates for about 6 months in 1993, I think it was.
How did that go?
Well, it was fine. And then he went, he had another friend moving into town, and then he left, just moved across town to another place. And then, I stayed with the same roommate for a couple of years after that. But then he moved out to LA, I think around 96, 97, around the same time. But around 96, I went to New York for about a year, about 13 months or so, about a year and 2 months. So what is that, 14 months? And then I moved to LA. So I got out here in November of 97, and then I've been here ever since. It's crazy. So I hosted a lot of television shows and on cable, things for HGTV. I hosted a movie presentation show on TBS for 9 years. And then, but I also travel, and I do a travel podcast and blog that I've had for 10 years now called Travel Tales. So I've done that, and yeah, you should do that sometime. Now that we should change. It's a very incestuous world of podcasting. Everybody does everybody else's show. But I've also been a co-host of Pat's podcast, The Rock Salad, for
absolutely,
geez, long time. For, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years. I don't even know how much anymore. But it's been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been fun to listen to it as well.
Oh, good. How did you find it?
Originally, I found it through Never Not Funny. So
right.
I already knew that,
Pardo and all those guys.
Yeah. And Murray as well, I think, and Mike Schmidt and all that, all that group.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. But honestly, I wasn't sure if you were born in Chicago or if you grew up elsewhere. So you were born in Chicago all the way.
Yeah, I was actually born in Wisconsin. And then we moved to Chicago when I was I was about 4. So
okay.
I don't remember much of Wisconsin. So. But for the rest of my life, it says Wisconsin on my passport. So,
okay.
But I grew up pretty much in Chicago, went off to university in Illinois and all that stuff. So, yep, Midwestern kid.
I didn't know you lived in New York either. How did you like the experience?
You know what? It was the natural progression is there comes a moment in every performer's life, and whether you're an actor or comedian or anything in Chicago, that you'd have to decide when to leave, and go. Because if you want to do TV work, TV and film is always out in LA, At the time, everybody thought I was going to go straight to LA like everybody else, like Pat did, like Pardo, and like everybody else was going. And you can't stay too long. You got to do it while you're young enough where you can struggle and leave everything behind. Once you start getting married and having kids, you're done. If you're 30, the older you are, they don't like you out here. It's a weird thing in the business. But yeah, I was all set to come to LA. I would come out to LA maybe once a year, just kind of lay the groundwork. And just like, okay, I always wanted to live in California my whole life. It was all set to go. And then right that summer before I was going to move, I went and visited our other roommate, John, who Pat and I lived with, and who I stayed living with. He ended up moving right to New York. And I had never really been to New York. I went there once as a kid with my parents. My parents were from the East Coast. My dad was a New Jersey guy, and my mom was from Connecticut. So,
okay.
But I never really knew it. I went there in the 80s, and it was horrible from what I remember. The 80s were, if you look at movies from the 70s and 80s from New York, it looked that awful. It was terrible. And so I had no real desire to go. But then I went and visited him. John was living in the Village, and I just spent a week out there, and it was great. And I went, I'm going to go to a new LA eventually. And at this point, I was making my living full time doing colleges and clubs, and most were on the Midwest or the East Coast. So there was a lot more work as a comedian. And New York was famous is really for comedy because there's so many clubs that you can work. And, everybody would say, oh, you can grow so much as a comedian in New York because you can do 5 sets a night going from across town to different things, and you can work on so much material, and it is great. But when I got there, I realized, only a handful of guys were getting all those spots. I mean, it was the same, the same guys. I would see their names on the list, and at the time it was like Jim Gaffigan, Mark Maron, Bill Burr was one of them, and Greg Giraldo, and guys like that. They were getting tons of spots. I was maybe getting 1 or 3 a week or something, but it takes time. I was a new guy in town. But I just thought also, not only it would be better for comedy, I just thought it would be a great life experience. I only planned to be there like 2 years at the most and then go to LA. And it ended up being a year and a couple of months because I ended up getting a deal with NBC. I did the Montreal Comedy Festival.
Oh yeah, just for laughs.
Just for a year.
Yes.
And I was a new face of 1997. And so I got some network attention there, and I ended up getting a contract. And so I went to LA in the most ideal way, which was being called out and having a job in hand. So that was a job. Well, not really a job, but a contract, which is the way you want to go rather than just show up and say, hey, look at me.
Here I am.
They say, hey, you're a waiter. Enjoy that. Here's your apron.
And you're working on a script.
Yeah, exactly. So November of 97 is when I came out here. And I've been out here ever since. But that's how it kind of worked out. And I was so great. I lived in Brooklyn when I was in New York, and I was so glad I did it, because, you see it your whole life, you hear about it on TV shows and the city. And it was just like, you grow so much in a year of living in the city that, and I wasn't coming from the sticks, I was coming from Chicago, which is the third biggest. I had lived in the city. I was used to taking trains and buses. It wasn't like I was coming from a cornfield, but still it moves at a different energy. It's just different. And I think it's hard, but you got to do it while you're young, though. You know what I mean? While you can still live in a closet, while you can still, have roommates. I had 2 roommates in Brooklyn before it was popular.
Okay.
It was just Brooklyn. It wasn't Brooklyn.
Yeah.
But now it's like hipster land, and I can't imagine what our apartment goes for now there. I mean, it's got to be crazy.
How much was it back then?
I know my share of it, I think, was $550, but there was 3 of us.
Okay.
And one of them had like a bottom, but it was 2 floors. It was 3 bedrooms. We had a little backyard. Oh my God. It was a park slope, which is, now so gentrified. And I can't imagine I think our whole rent was probably maybe 2,000, and now it would be like 4 to 5, I would bet.
And actually, you did answer the question, but in a kind of roundabout way. If I ask
roundabout. Sorry, I'll do it.
No. But that's not a problem at all. But I'm still not sure if you enjoyed the experience.
I did.
Okay.
I did. It was the first few months are hard. You just kind of like, it's an adjustment. The speed of it just moves faster. And I forget these little common Midwest courtesies that I had grown up with and gotten used to, like people saying "excuse me" when they bump into you, or smiling when you pay them at the cash register. It's like, forget all that. The New York, it doesn't, just keep moving. Wow. But as a life experience, it's great. And I didn't know, what did for my entire life I heard Long Island. Well, what does that mean, really? When you get, okay, now I know, and now I know how far things were. But it was also interesting to see, like in road gigs, because it was nothing for us in the Midwest to drive like 7-8 hours to do, for us to go. We used to do clubs in like Omaha, which would be an 8-hour drive. And I knew St. Louis is about 4.5-hour drive. I knew that Minneapolis is about 6-hour drive. Chicago, I had them all down 3 hours. It was about 4.5 to Detroit. I knew it all. But on the East Coast, things are so much closer together that, the New York comics, when they say, "Oh, I got to go all the way to Boston this week," it's like, it's 4 hours. It's nothing.
Yeah, it's a piece
like
of
that's
cake.
long to you. Yeah, for them that was like a big deal. Going to DC was like 4 hours, and I'm just going 4 hours. That's nothing.
They could fly as well. Yeah. So
yeah, and they had actual trains that went everywhere.
Yeah,
too.
Absolutely.
In the Midwest, we didn't have a lot of those options, but I just it was a great learning and living experience, and I'm so glad I did it. I wouldn't want to go back now, but I think every young person should live there for a year, and almost like in the Peace Corps, where it's like certainly American kids, because we forget how segregated most cities are and most of the country is.
That's true.
And in New York, that's impossible to be. I mean, the second you step out of your apartment, you hear like 4 different languages. You cram up against each other on the subway. You gotta learn to deal with people, and most people don't, especially if you're in a driving culture, which most of America is. There's only a handful of cities you can get by without a car, and cars are just like your own bubbles, and then you just don't interact with
that's
people.
True.
So and in New York, that's impossible. So, and then you learn that, this Muslim guy next to me and dressed all weird to me is he just wants to get to work like me. And we're just trying to get this thing moving. Let's go. And you just kind of deal with each other. And that's what, it was healthy. And I think most kids lack that, at least in America growing up.
Yeah, it must have been kind of an eye-opener in a way. Although Chicago is, diverse.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing, but even more so.
Not to that extent.
Yeah, and it's just, it's intense, but it's a good kind of intense. And if you're single, there's no better place to be either. I mean,
true.
When you go out, it's open all night. Manhattan is just an island of single people. It's fun. So a kid can get in a lot of trouble there, but he can also do good things. So it worked out for me. And I got my first TV gig there. I was a VJ.
Okay.
On VH1.
Oh, nice. Blast
Yeah,
from the
for 3
past.
months, 13 weeks, 13 weeks.
So was it a 3-month contract?
Yeah, and they didn't renew it.
Oh.
But right at the end of the contract, that's when I did Montreal, the festival, and luckily it worked out that I didn't, miss the job that much. But it helped that when I went to Montreal, I was already on TV on VH1,
Oh, yeah,
so
that's
that
true.
kind of added to my cachet, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But it was great, for a music geek like you and me.
Yeah.
To be a VJ, I was like, oh man, I got to, interview rock stars, and it was fun. I was nervous. I found old video of it, and it's just like, oh boy, oh boy. But I remember the first ones I interviewed was like Mellencamp
Oh, wow. Okay.
and Cyndi Lauper. Yeah.
You showed on Instagram, you showed old TV ads.
Oh God.
Could you do the same with
Yeah.
VH1 clips?
I have some, and I was going to post some.
Okay.
I have to edit them. Thanks for reminding me. I kept meaning to do that. That was like a COVID project I was thinking of doing.
Okay.
Just the VH1 years. But yeah, I have some reads. Oh my God. I introduced every day I would have to do the countdown, because playing videos, just like MTV, they were phasing them out because they got the worst ratings.
Okay.
So they buried the videos like at 9 a.m. during the week, and people would say, "Oh yeah, I saw you when I was working out at the gym on my treadmill." They would leave it on or something, but that it was like background noise, But so we would do the top 5 countdown or something, and it was the same songs for my 3 months. It was the same. It was.
Jesus.
I remember it was "Sonny Came Home" by Sean Colvin, "Bitch" by Meredith Brooks, "Mbop" by Hanson.
Okay.
Oh God, yeah. I there was something by the Spice Girls too. We talked about them a lot. Yeah, 97. This was Sarah McLachlan. This is prime Lilith Fair territory. There was a lot of Sheryl Crow in there. Yeah. So, the 90s. That was good stuff. But it was great. I mean, it was great learning. I remember RuPaul had a talk show, and we shared a studio.
Oh yeah, I forgot the name, but that rings a bell.
Yeah, that was like his first. He had a little talk show, and our tiny little studio that was on the west side in Manhattan, and it was like, so we would have to clear the set so he could come in and do the RuPaul show. But he's already like 6'6" or 6'7",
Yeah.
and then with the wig and the heels, that's like 7 feet of drag queen coming down the hallway, and you're like, what? Whoa! I mean, it's striking.
That gets your attention.
Yeah. But I remember the first day I went into the studio, I still is the only celebrity sighting I've ever been shaken up. That I was nervous was George Harrison was there.
Oh.
And because he was with Ravi Shankar promoting, Ravi had an album out.
Okay.
And so George was there helping to promote it. And he was in the studio, and I was like, everybody was abuzz that he's here. He's in the green room. He's like, and so I literally there a day. I was nobody. I wasn't going to get the interview. John Fugelsang got the interview. He got all the good interviews. And so he gets it. And I'm just like walking past the green room door, like back and forth. And he can kind of see me. I know he saw me. He's like, look at this idiot. Just like, I'm trying to be cool and not geek out. And then I saw the Scorsese documentary. I don't know if you've seen it, Living in the Material World. It's great. But they play a clip of him. I think it was only a few years before he died. I think he died in 2001 or 2000. And so it might have been one of his last, if not his last trip to America or something. Mm. But he's playing with Ravi on the set, it's just doing like chants and stuff.
Wow.
But they pan back, they pull the camera back, and there's fucking Fugelsang sitting there. And I was like, he got that interview. But what you can't see is me walking in the hallway like an idiot trying to poke my head and
trying
I
to
was
wave.
like, I was there.
Nice.
Yeah. So every time I see that clip jumps up in that documentary, I go, oh, I was there.
So close.
Yeah.
So that was one of my questions, actually. What was your most memorable brush with fame? So I guess that counts.
That was a big one. And it was, for your first one, that's always going to hit you harder.
Sure.
I was never, but my TBS job, which was a show called, it was TBS Movie Extra. First it was called The Movie Break, but basically we would come on during the commercial breaks of a movie and do like Hollywood news and then upcoming films and stuff like that. So I would do a lot of press junkets.
Okay.
Over the years for upcoming movies that were coming out. And so I did like hundreds of celebrity interviews, and I never got really starstruck. No, not really. And also, it's a pretty controlled environment. Their publicist is there. We're at a little amount of time. We had to talk about whatever dumb film they're plugging. It wasn't really. I wasn't out trying to get gossip or anything like that.
The shield is always up for them. You're not going to get a nugget of,
I would try to have as much fun with it as I could, if they were, but some actors are certainly a lot more fun than others.
I can imagine.
Some people are just bad interviews. For whatever reason, like De Niro was always a famously bad interview.
Yeah, he's
just a boring guy. He's just like, he's got not much personality. So you very rarely see him do interviews alone because he knows it. He doesn't like doing them.
Okay.
Usually he'll be sitting there with his co-star or director or something, and because he doesn't have a lot to say.
So who would you say is the one interview that, you really blew you away? Like, wow, that guy, I can understand why he or she is a star.
Yeah, there were some people I just could have talked to all night. Guys like Emma Thompson from England. She was great. Bette Midler was very, very funny. There was a actress, Brittany Murphy, who sadly died or OD'd or committed suicide or something.
I think it was an OD.
I interviewed her a year before she passed, and I was like, she was amazing. She was like a ball of energy. She was so much fun to interview, and Sandra Bullock was cool. The comedians were always fun. Steve Carell and I used to joke because Steve Carell did Second City in Chicago.
Okay.
Around the same time I was starting in comedy in the early 90s, and so we all hung out at the same after hours bars. So we ended up talking about this bar that we all used to go to all the time. It's like, did you get the chicken wings there? They were the best wings. Yes. They were
nice.
And he was great. Comedians are great because you can just go anywhere with it and they don't get offended by anything. And they're just so comfortable being themselves because they're used to it.
That's true.
Actors are not. There's a reason a lot of them want a script.
Yeah, good point.
Because they get nervous about doing interviews. Like Nicole Kidman was always she's a tough interview because she was shy, I guess. I think they think that they need to be funny and they don't know, that's not their thing.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just very kind of, just mellow. And you're trying to drag stuff out of her and you're like, no.
It's not easy.
But I remember Sandra Bullock being really cool. Jim Carrey was a lot of fun. There was the latest person, the person who made us wait the longest. Can you guess? Young actress. You don't hear too much anymore. Young starlet, known for partying.
God.
Redhead.
You're going to say her name and I'm going to say, of course. So please go ahead.
Oh, now I'm blanking on her name.
Okay. Is it Natasha Lyonne?
No.
Okay.
What was the Herbie the Love Bug? Lindsay Lohan.
Oh, yes.
Lindsay Lohan.
Jesus.
She made us wait for about 2.5 hours.
Wow.
But I got a nice photo out of it. Vin Diesel was a little under 2 hours, which, come on. That's just kind of a dick move.
Yeah. It's not great.
Yeah. But most people are shorter than you think they are, than you think they'd be.
Okay.
That's true of most famous people you meet. It's like, some reason I thought you'd be bigger.
Well, we know about Tom Cruise, of course.
Tom Cruise is short, but the only people that were taller than I thought they'd be were like John Cusack was taller than I thought they'd be.
Oh, yeah. Isn't he like 6'3" or something?
I don't know if he's that big. He's probably about 6'2", but DiCaprio.
Oh, okay.
He's like, Leonardo DiCaprio is like a tall guy. You think he's got that baby face and he'd be a small dude, but he's tall. I was like, whoa.
Okay.
And most women are tiny and skinny, like Nicole Kidman is like 5'11". She's tall. There's a couple 6-footers. Sigourney Weaver is a 6-footer.
Yes, that's true.
She's tall. Allison Janney's really tall. Well, it makes sense. Joan Cusack's really tall too. So I guess they were just a tall family. But yeah, Vince Vaughn's super tall.
Oh yeah, big guy too, right?
He's like 6'5", 6'6". Yeah. So some of those guys, you want them to be big. I saw Clint Eastwood, and he was like an old man. He's in his 80s, but he was still he wasn't a small guy.
That's
true.
True.
You want Clint to be big, and he's like, okay, he's big enough.
Larger than life.
Yeah. You it would be so disappointing to see a tiny Clint Eastwood. And I'm like, oh, come on, really?
It would be weird. It would feel really weird.
Right? It would be. Yeah.
I was wondering, okay, first, education. What did you want to study at first?
Well, I really went, I didn't know anything. Like, I didn't try hard to, like, when I was going to university, I just wanted to leave the house and, I knew I was going to go, but I didn't know where. I put so little effort into it. Looking back, I'm just like, oh. But like I said, my dad, I had a brother and a sister, and I'm the middle kid, but he sat us all down in high school. My dad said, you guys can go to school, college, wherever you want, as long as it's an Illinois state school. And we're like, well, that narrows it down. Yeah. He said, you can go out of state or to a private school, but then you'd have to, take out a loan, get a job. And I was like, whoa. I think we both know a job is not going to happen. So, so we all went to state schools. I went to Northern Illinois University. And I did have an interest in studying like radio, TV, and that kind of thing.
Okay.
And I knew I liked to write. My parents were scientists, so it's odd that none of us went into the sciences, which is very, maybe they turned us off to it all. But I didn't have the math science side of the brain. It just never clicked. I was fine with math until they threw algebra at me. And then I was like,
nope.
Like 8th grade. I'm like, nope, never.
I'm done.
If we're going to put letters in it, if we're putting letters in here, I'm out. So I went in there and ended up studying. It was going to be radio TV. And then, I don't know, somebody talked me out of it. Like it was, oh, you can't get a good job that way. So I ended up taking some watered down thing called corporate communications, which was basically journalism, PR, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So that was the degree I got. And then I did end up working, I was a journalist. I ended up working for a newspaper chain outside of Chicago for 4 years. And that's how I supported myself while starting out comedy and stuff. I kept that day job as long as I could. I wasn't making much, but it was enough to pay my bills and still allow me at night to go out and try comedy. So I was a sports writer and features, for a local chain outside of Chicago. So I was a newspaper writer. Remember newspapers?
Yes.
We had these things. It was an actual piece of paper that told you what happened.
Okay, so
God, I sound 90 talking about. I was in the newspaper game.
Wow, yeah.
But it wasn't. That's what it was. It was a different time.
No, yeah.
I'm glad I did it. I mean, to learn to. I was writing, but I was always interested in writing. I mean, ideally, I think I wanted to be. I never saw myself as a performer. I thought I was going to be I wanted to be like a sitcom writer or something like that. That ended up being more. I thought writing was going to be the path that was going to do me.
Is that what you were better at?
Well, I didn't come out of a performing background. A lot of comics, they were in theater.
Okay.
As kids, they were in the school play or they were just performers in some way, and I just wasn't. I was pretty shy as a teenager and stuff. Like people from high school they never could believe that I went into performing. They were like, "You were always so quiet," and just like, I was. I came out of my shell more in university. People kind of bought it then, but people from high school. Well, you're a comedian now. You were funny, but in the back of the room, like a lot of comics. And I was a funny kid in the back of the room, making the other kids laugh. But I didn't want to be up on stage
Okay.
It was a very, very scary thing. So I got into it as a writing thing. I mean, I always loved stand up from an early age, but I didn't, where I grew up, saying you wanted to be in show business was like saying you wanted to walk on the moon.
Be an astronaut.
They pat you on the head and you go, "Oh, that's cute." But what do you really want to do?
Yeah.
And so I didn't think I thought you had to be from, New York or Hollywood or something. I didn't know you could just get into it. And it wasn't so I used to love going to clubs and seeing comedians.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I was old enough, like after college, that I could go to these clubs. And I would go during the week on a Tuesday night to some crappy club outside of Chicago. And it would just be like, oh, this kid, we're the same age and he's from here. And he's up there doing it. And he's terrible. I know I could be that terrible if I really, he's still doing it. And it's like, so this is possible. I guess anybody can go up there if you really. So I just wrote for 6 months, in my room, just trying to think of jokes and come up with some material. And I just picked one night to, try to do an open mic and sign up. And I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell any of my friends, or it was just far too scary. It was a very personal thing. I've never gone really that far out of my comfort zone in anything. So this is a real, and if it went badly, I guess no one would have to know ever.
Yeah.
So I picked some random bar in Chicago and then signed up one night. But I did it once and then I was kind of hooked. And then I was like, oh, okay. Now I have something to shoot for.
Yeah.
Now I have something to I really want to pursue.
But that's the thing. Not only you're leaving your comfort zone, but you are in the process, you are making yourself super vulnerable on the stage, So that's two things.
Yeah, you're not hiding behind a script, a play, a director, or other actors. You're not in a band. You're solo, man. It's you and a microphone and a hot light on you. So it was really, really hard. But I mean, that's what appeals to a lot of us, because I guess in the end, most comedians are control freaks.
Is it your case?
We're not good team players. Yeah. I think now I'm much more open to collaborating with people, but now you just want to kind of, you don't want everybody messing with what you're saying, and there's great freedom in that. And then there's no filter, there's no editors, there's no people telling you, a director going, no, do it this way. It's like, it's all you.
Yeah.
For better or for worse, but it is all you. So it's in a way, it's almost the freest art form, if we want to call it an art form. But
because when you write for a sitcom, then you have 10 people looking over your stuff and editing it,
Yeah, and they throw out 90% of what you write. Yeah. And, you're collaborating with others. And in the end, who came up with that joke? I don't remember who came up with that joke, but it was good. But I guess it's a way of wanting credit for everything that goes well. But you got to be there to take the criticism as well. And you can't pass it off on anybody else either.
That's true.
and say, the network, we wrote a better script, but the network ruined it. You can't. It's you. You making up the whole script. So that appeals. It's a freedom that, for people who are worked with others for a long time, kind of that's what they're looking for, because, I can just it's on you. It's on you, which makes it very scary to a lot of people.
So had the comedy thing not worked at all, I suppose you would have stayed in a writing environment, or did you have something else completely as a plan B, or?
I don't know. I mean, I think if I was going to, if I did comedy and it was just like, okay, I got that out of my system and, and I tried it once, it wasn't for me, probably would have gone back to, I would still had my writing job. This was like a year out of college, so I had no money. I was still living with my parents. But I think I might have gone into probably sports journalism. I probably would have try to get into TV. I did do some of that.
Okay.
Could have been on SportsCenter, on ESPN or something. That seemed, looking back, would probably be a direction I probably would have gone. I probably would have moved away. I already was getting bored with newspapers. I probably would have wanted to get in television somehow.
Okay. And
whether that would have been and it probably would have been sports the way in. I liked it much better than actual news.
It's just depressing.
Yes. And because there's no stakes. I mean, you can be funny. You can, I wrote a column, and in the end, it is just sports.
Yeah.
You can bring some humor into what I would write a weekly column, and that was my humor, but I'd put it out there. And there was another reason that I liked stand-up is I'd type something up and print it and thought it was funny, and it would go out in the paper. But you never knew if people read it, if they liked it, if they enjoyed it, unless they wrote you back, which hardly anybody did. So, and stand-up was immediately. You wrote something you thought you were funny, you said it, and in a second if it works or not.
That's true.
So I loved the feedback. It was immediate, and I think I probably would have moved toward television if I could. Whether in front of or behind the scenes, I really wanted to get into that.
You mentioned feedback from the public a few seconds ago. Who would you say is the best audience for stand-up in North America? I assume that the New York crowds are tougher than the LA crowds?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I don't know. I find LA crowds to be tougher. I mean, when people ask, what are the big differences in, I'd work the South or you'd work certain areas of the country. And it's just I don't think the differences tend to be region as much as they are urban and rural.
Okay.
Which kind of goes along with a lot of the political divides and things like that. It's, people in cities are just exposed to more stuff. So they have more reference points to go by. I'm not saying there's not people who get jokes out in small towns. There are. But I don't know. And also cities, they're exposed to more entertainment. So they're a little more cynical. And when I got to New York, I mean, I was making my living as a middle act, like a feature act at clubs all around the Midwest. And I was doing fine. But when I got to New York, I was really, oh man, I had to throw away like half of my act because it was just like, this is not playing the big city. This is like hacky road stuff, and they've seen it a million times. And there was a big difference of being one of three people in town, that one of three comics in your town that week. It's easy to, be a star then.
Yeah.
But when you go to New York and every show, you're one of 30 comics on the bill that night. Everybody's doing 5 minutes and you're one of an endless string of young white guys going up there. You better do something. There was no time to mess around. I had to learn how to do a short set. I was used to doing a half hour. And then you would do a college, you'd do an hour. Well, then you have a lot of time to like, bullshit basically, and just, take your time, talk to people. Hey, what are you doing? Just whereas New York or LA, it's like, hey man, you got 4 minutes. You better bring it, and then there's an agent coming to see you.
Okay.
So now you had to look about, okay, wait a minute. How do I compress into that 4 minutes who I am, what I'm about, what's my point of view, and be funny, and have a beginning and a middle and a close, and get on and make some kind of an impact. That was a thing I really had to learn, and it was hard. And it's if you're used to just having a half hour.
I'm guessing you already knew the basics to that, because in journalistic writing, you already had to have some structure in your material,
Yeah, but it's not like there's difference in getting a laugh and
telling a story straight up. That's true.
Or what are you saying? It just that airplane joke might work every time, and it does work every time, but nobody, after seeing 30 comics, needs to hear another airplane joke. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
It's really general humor.
Yes.
Like general observational stuff that gets laughs, but you'll just blend in with the woodwork after a while. And so it was interesting that like a lot of Midwestern comics who were like, quote unquote, too weird to get work. So the way we got work throughout in most cities, other than New York or LA, is that it's like a 3 comic a show. Now, most clubs are 3 comics. There's an MC/opener who does like 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm. There's
a feature act who does like half an hour, and the headliner would do 45 minutes. So you start out usually as an MC. So that MC is usually the beginner comic, or like the one who's been doing it the least amount of time. And it's usually a pretty straightforward comic. You can't, if you're up doing a weird character, like an Andy Kaufman kind of guy or whatever, you can't MC with that. People, that's too weird to open a show with. And so, but a lot of those guys, they didn't have a half hour of stuff. They couldn't sustain it for a half hour to be a middle act. So a lot of those guys fell in between the cracks.
Okay.
And they couldn't get work in the Midwest. Like I started out with a couple guys, Matt Besser and Matt Walsh, who are in Upright Citizens Brigade.
Yeah.
And those guys used to do, I mean, they started in Second City. They were sketch guys, and then they went in the Annoyance, and they started their own sketch thing. But they also did stand up. But they were weird. They did characters and stuff. And club owners in Chicago didn't know what to do with them. They're like, well, he can't MC with that, but he can't do a half hour with that. And so they didn't get work. So they went back into sketch or improv or something.
Okay.
But they went to New York, but 5 minutes of that on a showcase in New York or LA stands out.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. And those guys can be popular in a place like New York, where, in a parade of white people talking about their parents, and, and it's like, hey, I'm half Jewish, half Catholic. And everybody, I'm Puerto Rican, and I've got, whatever your thing is that we all talk about starting out, somebody who's doing something different stands out in a 20-person show. Mm. And all he's got to do is 5 minutes. And he's got 5 minutes. 5 minutes of weird is kind of like, whoa, what was that? So a lot of those guys found kind of more success on the coasts, in New York or LA than they did in most cities, because they're too weird. Which is, when you're too weird in anything, that's why cities exist. That's why people go to them.
That's true.
Young people, whether you're leaving your hometown for something, you're looking for something more. People are still coming to LA. A lot of people are leaving California. A lot of people leaving New York, and especially since the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And people wonder if these cities are dying. But cities are always around because you want to test yourself and you want something more. Sometimes it's just to get away from your family, get away from whatever you're bored of, whatever you're not getting at home. Or some people just come to just get out of the closet, or whatever it is.
Mm.
You want to leave whatever, and cities are great for that. And test yourself against the best of the best. You think, so you're a big deal in Tampa, a musician. So, okay, but in your 20s, you're like, hey, am I really that good? Well, let me go to the big city and you make contacts and also a bigger dating pool.
Also that.
That's why cities are good for that. And, hopefully you grow from them. And that's why people come. Yeah, they're hard. They're expensive. They're, but when you're young and single and hungry and ambitious,
that's the place.
They're great.
That's true.
And there's a big difference in, my friends, people have been trying to tell me, hey man, you should come to Florida. It's so cheap. You get so much house here. And just, yeah, you can. I can also go to Iowa and live like a king, in prices, and do what? You know what I mean? I'm getting to an older part of my life that, leaving the city doesn't sound that badly if you don't need it anymore. You either need it for work, for dating, or the culture, whether you're into the theater, the nightlife, or the whatever that. But after a certain age, if you're not going out that much, you're married, I get it. Then you move on and you pass the city down to a younger generation and let them go at it.
Yeah.
And I'm in this building, I'm in Santa Monica, and it's stupid expensive. And some 20-something kid just moved into the building, and it's like he's paying this rent that I was like, I don't know what this kid does. He obviously works, he better, or he's got family money. But during the pandemic, people have been leaving LA, especially since, they're doing a lot more stuff remotely now. I'm doing virtual auditions. I'm doing Zoom auditions. And so unless you really need to be here.
Yeah.
And now, the internet's a great equalizer.
True.
I don't know. When I looked at in the 90s in Chicago, it's like, oh, we all have to go to LA. We have to go if you want to. But now you can be a YouTube star from anywhere. Do you need to come out here you ask kids what they want to do now. They don't want to be TV stars. They want to be YouTube stars.
Yeah.
And you could do that from your home anywhere. You could do it from Quebec.
Yeah. Maybe you don't need to go to LA as much as you used to anymore. That's true.
No.
That's true.
But still people are coming. Young people.
So, how has you mentioned the pandemic? How has it treated you overall? Like, we are seeing the end of it, I hope, soon-ish.
So May 6th through 9th, I'm doing my first stand-up gig in 14 months.
Oh, wow.
I've never been off stage this long in 30 years, It's weird.
Nervous?
A little bit, but it's a great gig. So talk about a 3-person show. I'm emceeing, which is a nice way back. I'm doing like 15 minutes. And I'm opening for my friend Gary Brightwell, who's a regular opener for Brian Regan. So it's me, Gary Brightwell, and Brian Regan.
Okay. And
Brian Regan, I don't know if people know who he is out there, but he's a huge comic, one of the best. Mm-hmm. And so we're doing the Irvine Improv. It's half filled, I believe. It's a big room.
Okay.
But I think it's half filled, which is about 250 people.
Okay.
And they spread out the tables and something. I don't know what it's going to look like, but it'll be sold out.
Oh, for sure.
In front of his crowd, which is going to be great. And but that first set, it's going to be weird. It's going to be timing stuff. I've been listening to like old sets and trying to remember. Oh yeah, that bit, and just
getting your swing back.
Yeah, it's just you forget. You do get rusty. There's going to be little things that I think so it's Thursday through Sunday. I think by Saturday I should be back on my feet again. But it's a nice way to ease back. But I was doing the last 4 years. I started doing cruises.
Yes.
And, no industry got hit harder than that.
That's true.
So I don't know when or if I'll be back on them. I don't know. I was never one of those 40-week-a-year guys that made their living on cruises. So I was only doing about 12 to 15 weeks a year.
And if I may, from the way you talked about them, you didn't seem to enjoy them that much.
There was parts. I'm thankful for the work, and I was
Sure.
parts of it was good training because I did a comedy special for Dry Bar Comedy, which is out there.
Okay.
So here's my plug. I can get in. You can see my Dry Bar Comedy special.
Sure.
You go to Dry Bar Comedy and then look my name up. It's called Have Jokes, Will Travel. But the thing about Dry Bar is it's all clean. They're a Mormon-run company.
Okay.
And so they wanted, we taped it in Utah, in Provo, Utah, which is very Mormon.
Yes.
So, and it wasn't just language. I mean, it was just, they were particular about things like you couldn't say, "Oh my God."
Ooh, wow.
Even as an aside, they didn't want that. They didn't want to be too critical of marriage and things like that. It was really interesting, like drinking references and it's just, but you have to be really clean on ships, which is a hard learning curve. So I had been doing ships for a few years before I did the special, which was great training.
Yeah.
And once they told me all this, it was like, yeah, you got to be super clean. I'm like, no problem. Easy. But for comics who have just been doing clubs for all this time, that's a hard, it's like, what? I can't say this. I can't do that. I can't. And I was like, yep, that's the way it is. Cruises work kind of the same way. I mean, no politics on cruises, no overly sexual stuff. They want a clean show. And it's hard because you could be doing all ages. There could be whole families sitting in the room. And there are often, it's kids next to 80-year-olds. It's brutal. I mean, it's really, really hard.
On cruises, there are no like late night shows that anything goes?
Some of them have it.
Okay.
Depends on the cruise line.
Okay.
I didn't work on a line that had those. I think I did one. I did one on Princess that they tried to do. Yeah, it's like a late night show. They build it as anything goes. And I say to the cruise director, I was like, okay, you say that. But your anything goes and my anything goes is a lot different. I don't think you want anything goes. I think their idea of it was like, ooh, if you said shit once, that was like a big deal. But they're just very hard. But the money was decent. And I got to go as a traveler, go to some really cool places like Antarctica, which was the last continent I hadn't been to. And it's usually pretty expensive and hard to get there. And I got paid to go. So that was pretty amazing.
Nice.
I went to Europe only once on one ship, but that was great. But what I would do, the flight was paid for.
Mm-hmm.
They had to fly me in and out. So I remember we were going to London. We were the only European one I did. I met the ship in Bordeaux, just for like a high-end cruise line. And so I was meeting the ship in Bordeaux, France, and it went around the Normandy coast up to England. And then we let our passengers out, and the new passengers came. And then we went up to Antwerp.
Nice.
And then Amsterdam. And they were going to fly me back from Amsterdam. And I went, hey, can I stay for a little while? And they went, yeah, as long as you fly back from Amsterdam, the port that we don't care. I was like, oh, well, hell, I can get a flight back to Amsterdam from anywhere in Europe.
Yeah.
So I just picked a date 3 weeks later, and I got off the ship in Amsterdam. And I just traveled for 3. I went down, meet some friends, and I hadn't seen much of Belgium that much at all. So I went to Brussels and Bruges and what's the Ghent?
Yes.
Ghent was great. I loved them both. I liked it better than Bruges, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Well, I think it was less touristy.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that maybe in itself.
They're both pretty.
Yes.
They're both pretty.
Yeah, but Bruges is probably prettier, but a lot more tourists. That's true. So,
what did you think of Brussels? That's nice, but I didn't think there was much happening there.
What I like to look for is street art. Okay. And there is a surprising amount of it in Brussels. Because of Tintin and all the comic books and all that, and there are many murals related to that. It's super clean. It's easy to navigate. It's really pretty. The Old Town Square, the Grand Place, is spectacular. But if you're talking vibe and nightlife and stuff like that, that's not the place. That's true. So I mean, I liked it. I've been there 2 or 3 times for maybe 5 or 6 days total.
Right.
But it's great, but depends on what you're looking for, I guess.
Yeah. I just love how it's what was the number one tourist attraction? And it's the mannequin piece.
Oh no, yeah,
It's basically a small boy
Yeah.
taking a piss.
Yeah,
That's the statue. I was like, this is lines of people trying to go see this thing. It's like, it's a statue of a boy pissing. And yeah.
you got to think of it as a gimmick. It's kind of its own
Yeah.
inside joke because it sucks.
Right.
Yeah, it's like 14 inches tall.
Yes, it's nothing.
And I think every day of the year they put a different costume on it.
Yeah.
Because I remember for Quebec City's 400th anniversary in 2008, I think they had it wear the Quebec flag or something.
Okay.
But yeah, they do that. Yeah, I mean, once you get past that, I mean, there are plenty of other things to see in that city. And
sure.
Waffles are great chocolate.
Yeah, the fries.
Yes.
The chocolate, the beer is fantastic.
I'm not a beer guy, but the beer
there. Yeah. You have to go to, I tell people who love beer, there's 3 countries that the beer belt, I call it.
Yes.
Well, Germany, of course.
Yes.
Belgium.
Yes. And
the Czech Republic.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And they're amazing. And the Czech Republic blew me away, man. I'm like, you could go into any bar and just pick a random beer. Like, give me the cheapest local thing, the tap there. And you taste it, and it was like, oh my God, I'd pay $30 for this back home. This is amazing.
Yeah.
It was really good. Really, really good.
So you're more of a beer guy than a wine or liquor guy.
I do like wine. I do like wine too. I mean, there's certain wine people have to visit certain countries, of course.
For sure.
But anywhere around the Mediterranean, I think you're pretty good.
You've been to Porto.
You know what? I've not been to Porto. I've been to the Algarve. I've been to Lisbon.
Mm-hmm.
But no, Porto's on my list. When I look at countries to possibly retire to, Portugal's always up there.
Yeah.
It's a popular one to retire to now, too, though. It's getting harder.
Well, yeah, but
and getting more expensive because all the...
But with Brexit, maybe it will be easier again.
Yeah, I mean, not as many Brits will be going, maybe.
True.
Well, you know where I went after Belgium on that trip?
Mm-hmm.
I went to Annecy, France. Do you know where that is?
Oh, yeah.
It's near the Swiss border.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful little town. My friend was having a conference there, and I met her.
I heard of it. It's on my list.
Yes, it's south of Geneva, I believe.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Switzerland, I can't get a vibe of. Every time I'm there, it's like, I don't know the vibe of this place, man. I mean, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yes.
It's very expensive.
Yes.
And, but there's no, like, when you think of a Swiss person, there's no vibe of their culture, you know, and it's a very odd thing. And I remember, do you know Frank Biernat?
Yes.
He was out visiting, doing Rock Solid, and I interviewed him for the podcast. And we were in Venice. He was staying in Venice, right by my house here. And I had met like a day before a Swiss couple also who were staying in Venice. I said, I have other friends that are here. We should all meet at this boat. And we all met. And I didn't realize that the other couple that I met were French Swiss. And Frank was like German Swiss.
Yeah.
And they might as well have been in a completely different country. And Frank said to me, half joking, he's like, oh, you brought the wrong Swiss. I was like, oh, wow. I mean, they had nothing to talk about. It was like nothing. It was so weird. And he was just saying how, like, there's no, like, real national Swiss politics, really. It's all local.
Yes.
Like, local politics have much more say than...
Yeah.
But it was just funny how the French-speaking part could have been living in an entirely different country.
That's true.
Than the German speaking.
And about Zurich, it's the city of banks and insurance companies. And it shows like it is spotless. Mm-hmm. Trains are on time, and that's not a joke. It's true. And your people are nice and all that. But it's like, it is, that sounds harsh, but it is kind of soulless.
Yes.
In a way.
I found that. It's just that you're looking for a culture that's something to grab onto, or something about it. Of like, most countries have a pretty distinct kind of culture about them, and it's just like, it just seems like a place we're all living, paying a lot,
and
it's
working,
a nice place. Yeah, just we're here to live and work and ski.
Yes, and I don't ski, so that was out. Yeah.
But the countryside, beautiful. I mean, it's gorgeous.
That's true. So and it is so expensive. I mean, I've been there only once, but when you have to pay something, every time you do, it really pisses you off. That kind of doesn't help enjoying the place.
Right. That's when you realize the banks are winning. It's like,
Oh, yeah.
you guys are winning. I see somebody's making money here, and it's you.
Oh, yeah.
It's you guys.
For sure. So,
Yeah. I missed you this 2 years ago. So the last summer cruise, usually in the last few summers, I was going to Alaska.
mhm.
So those are the summer gigs I would take. But 2 summers ago, the last one I did was Boston to Montreal.
Okay.
So I did it 6 weeks in a row in the summer.
Ah,
So
Jesus.
1 week up, 1 week down, 1 week up, 1 week down. So we would stop in, Montreal, Quebec City,
Mhm.
and then we'd go around, and then all the maritime islands. We went to PEI, Nova Scotia. 2 stops in Nova Scotia. Yeah, one city we could have stopped. I think it was Sydney.
Possible. Either Halifax or Sydney, I guess.
Yeah, Halifax was good.
Yeah, it's nice.
Sydney was skippable.
I've never been.
And then we went to Bar Harbor, Maine,
Okay.
and then Boston. And we did those stops. So I went to Quebec City 6 times.
Jesus.
I could have seen you.
Well, yeah.
Or Montreal. I mean, I only had a Saturday morning in Montreal, which was great. So I would get off the ship, and that's when when you're changing passengers, you're getting new loft. So we would have to be off by 9:30 in the morning or something.
Okay.
And I couldn't come back until like 2 or something.
Okay.
So I had to kill a day in either Boston. It was Boston there and
Montreal.
So I would go get my my bagels
Yes.
and the Montreal bagels, and then I would get my smoked meat
Yeah, for sure.
and then walk around, and it was great. And then in Boston, I would get my cannolis, and then I would go get some chowder, and I had good walks. I would walk all around the neighborhoods, and I thought Montreal was cool. Quebec City, what a beautiful place.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned that was 2 years ago. So what time of year was that?
Summer, they only do that in the summer.
Okay.
So I don't know. It was probably, I think it was July, August when I was there.
Okay. Well, I mean, next time, if you're in
If
the
there is a
area,
next time.
yeah, we should arrange something for sure.
Yeah, Quebec City was such a lovely surprise.
Especially in the old town is gorgeous, but in the winter it's even more.
Oh, it probably looks like a Christmas card.
Yeah, absolutely.
That big hotel.
Yes, the Chateau Frontenac.
Yes.
On top. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I wanted to get an old Nordiques hat.
Oh, yeah.
There was one store selling some Nordiques paraphernalia, but I don't know. It was expensive. I don't need another hat in my house, but still, I was like, it was cool, like an old Nordiques hat. I remember when they existed.
Yeah.
It didn't surprise me that they went out of business just because it was so close to Montreal. You can't compete with the Canadians. I mean, you can. But that market wasn't enough of a market. I don't know.
No, that wasn't the problem. The problem was the salaries were getting higher and higher, and the teams was getting worse and worse.
Yeah.
But every seat in that arena was sold all year, even when the team was terrible, and even the steps inside the arena, they had a sponsor on them. They squeezed every cent that they could out of that arena, and at some point, something had to give.
So did they move?
Yes, they moved to Colorado. They became the
They were the Avalanche.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Because when I was writing sports...
94.
Yeah, when I was writing sports in the early 90s, the Winnipeg Jets moved to Phoenix.
Yes.
And no one was happier than the hockey writers. I mean, because
that's true.
It's like, we get to go to Phoenix in the winter and not Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Like they all hated Winnipeg. Like everybody had a horrible story about getting trapped in Winnipeg in the snow or something, or it was freezing cold, or there was nothing to do. They all hated Winnipeg. Yeah. Every one of them hated. I still haven't been. There's been real reason for me to go to Winnipeg unless I'm going up there to work. I mean, I've been throughout Canada, but not Winnipeg. You need a reason to go to Winnipeg. I mean, you really do.
They have an NHL team again now.
I know the Jets they got another one again, and that, like you said, the support is there. It's whether the money can, to compete, it's very hard.
They are okay now, but and there is another team next year that Seattle Kraken.
Kraken is the worst. Why who voted on that?
I think the fans actually.
Wasn't it?
I'm not sure. I think they started with a vote, and then they chose the last 4 finalists. Out of that, they chose the Kraken, I think, or something like that. Yeah.
Don't let the people decide.
That's a good.
Were the Serpents, Seattle Serpents? Wouldn't that be great? The serpents?
That's good.
I mean, oh my God, that would be fantastic.
That's good. Yeah.
Like a sea creature with a hockey. I can see the logo in my mind. I don't know why they didn't go with the serpents.
Or you could go intersport rivalry and call them the Sonics.
Yeah, oh, that piss everybody off.
Yes.
I heard the Sonics might be coming back. I don't know. There's a lot of money there.
I was really surprised that they left in the first place, to be honest.
Yeah, there's no loyalty. There's just, if somebody gets a better deal somewhere, we're moving to Oklahoma City. It's like, who the hell wants to go to Oklahoma City? No offense to the Oklahomans, but honestly. So, I mean, the town must just dump a truck full of money and say, we'll build you a brand new stadium, anything you want, and come. And they do.
Yeah.
I can't believe like Sacramento still has an NBA team. I thought for sure that they were going to move to Vegas. And I thought maybe they still are. They still have time, but Sacramento, nobody likes Sacramento, and they'll never win. It's just the players don't want to go there. It's not a big market. I don't know why they didn't. Money. It's all money. Well, now with the soccer, with football, and the Super League stuff in Europe it's insane.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. The thing is, with North American sports, they can move franchises, but I guess it's never been done in England. That would be, there would be riots.
There was a riot.
Manchester, yeah.
Manchester United,
yes.
Yeah.
Old Trafford.
With their American owners.
Yes.
I know they're kind of, American owners are getting kind of the brunt of it because I think we're an easy target. But, why aren't they questioning these Emirati oil sheiks who come and use all their countries, or a Russian oligarch who's just, where's that money coming from? Let's be honest.
But the thing is, with the Glazers in Manchester United, they didn't use any of their own money to buy the club, and they
leveraged it.
Yeah, exactly. And they took money out of the club. Like I think they've taken $2 billion over the past 10 years or something. Yeah, I mean, the club is their cash cow, and they don't give a shit about the club or the fans.
No, it's one of their cash cows.
Yes.
I mean, they also own like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yes.
They own a lot.
Well, it's the same for Kroenke at Arsenal. I'm an Arsenal fan, and I cannot wait to see Kroenke out of there, even though he doesn't want to sell. Because Kroenke owns the Avalanche, I think, and St. Louis Rams.
The Denver Nuggets, I think, too.
Okay, possible. And the Rams are in St. Louis.
LA Rams.
Yeah. St. Louis, yeah.
Yeah, he owns all that. And you know who his wife is?
Yeah, it's the Walmart.
He married into the Walmart.
Yes,
sport.
yeah.
And he was already like rich. I mean, it's
insane.
A sick amount of money. Yeah. It's a sick amount of money. But knowing football around the world helps as a traveler immensely.
Yeah.
I learned that. I didn't get into it until I played growing up, but I didn't know anything about soccer. And I played through high school, mm-hmm. but there was not on TV.
That's true.
When I was growing up, we didn't have a pro league here in America. I couldn't follow it. We did into the NASL.
Yeah.
I went to a Chicago Sting game.
Oh, nice. Okay.
In like 80 or 81. And they won the championship twice.
I went to a Montreal Manic game in 82. Yes. The week after Italy won the World Cup against Germany.
Oh, wow.
And the stadium was full of people waving Italian flags. It was insane. And Montreal lost 1-0 against the Vancouver Whitecaps.
Yep.
I remember that.
Yeah, we had the Chicago Sting, and where the Cosmos were there. I mean, they were the big power. And then the whole league folded, I think, 83 or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
And then they had indoor soccer, which sucked.
Yes.
And I said, well, you didn't grow up with knowing any kind of future. And there was no internet. It didn't, cable TV even didn't show it. And so I kind of got hooked on it when I was traveling. I was in Italy during the 98 World Cup. My ex-girlfriend and her bunch.
Oh, nice.
And we didn't even know what was going on before we went. I mean, I didn't know anything about it. And then we got there, and I was like, why does everything in town shut down every night to watch these? Is this normal? What's happening? And so I ended up watching the Italy-France quarterfinal in this little town in Tuscany, just an hour outside of Rome, Santo Stefano? Porto Ercole, that's what it was. And everything, the whole country had shut down, basically. They set out a little tent out by the dock with a little TV in it, and all the town came down to watch this thing. And we went down there and drank wine and watched it and watched people go crazy. And I think they lost in a shootout or something that year. And
I think so, because France won the whole thing.
France won it all that year.
In 98, yes.
And so everybody was heartbroken. He was like, wow, you just kind of got sucked up into the passion of this whole thing. And then I started following, players and then, as the web and everything became more prevalent, I was like, oh, this is easy to follow along. And then I got into it. But around the world, knowing it really helps in terms of just conversation and
making friends.
I could talk to making friends in a hostel or at a pub somewhere or in a taxi, and whether it's Africa or I'll know like, why is my driver in India wearing a Liverpool shirt? And they're like, do you like the team? It's like, oh yeah, we like that. And then you're into it. So it's just kind of like closest thing to a world language.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely.
So if you can speak it, first of all, they're amazed that an American knows anything about it.
Yes.
And then when you realize, but I followed mostly the English league, but
do you have a favorite?
Well, that's the thing. It's like when you get in, you can just pick any team. And something about growing up in Chicago in the 70s, we sucked in every single sport. We won nothing. The first thing we won was the Sting in my life. It was the only time a Chicago team won anything.
Okay.
And it was like, this is how little soccer attention it got. I mean, I was probably on the third page of the sports page. Sting win championship. It was like nobody cared. And then the 80s came, and then we started to the Cubs got a little better, the White Sox got a little better, and then nobody won anything again. Well, the Bears won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, in 85.
And that really kind of started it, and then Michael Jordan showed up.
Yes.
And by the 90s, the Bulls went on that crazy thing. And now even the Cubs have won. So, I mean, so it's like, well, in England, I could pick any team that I wanted to follow and support.
Yes.
And at the time, it's like, it's too easy to pick like the richest. Like at the time, there was the Big Four. It was like, I'm not going to pick Manchester United.
Good start.
That was like picking the Yankees. They're just like, no, I can't. That's, oh, good. The richest team won again. Oh, good for you. But I also wanted a team that at least had a chance. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to pick like, I'm going to pick Crystal Palace. And they'll never win. Ever. They're never going to win. And you know it. So I thought, I like those teams that every year you think, this is it. This is going to be the one.
Don't say Spurs.
And then they rip your heart out.
Don't say Spurs.
They rip your heart out. Well, here's the thing.
Okay.
So there's those mid-table teams like that. So I looked at Everton. They were in the running there for a little bit.
Yeah.
Just like they never won anything, but they're like, oh, this could be it. And halfway through, it's like, nope, this is not going to be. And then I liked Newcastle for a little while when Alan Shearer was there, and he was great.
Yes.
Yeah, and I thought, man, they're going to be back. And it was like, no, they're not. Nope. And then I looked at Chelsea, and then a Russian oligarch buys them and stuff. It's like, well, this isn't as fun really either. And then I was looking at Spurs at Tottenham, and then one year they were going up to, I think in the last day of the season, they were going up to, I think, Liverpool. And if they won that day, they were going to get a Champions League spot for the first time.
Okay.
And this is like a huge game. And then the night before the game, half the team got food poisoning, and they went out and lost.
Oh, yeah.
And then I went, well, that's just pathetic. You can't even make that up. I say, I got to follow those guys, right? That's my team.
Oh,
so I've been following Spurs, and it's been a horrible, painful. It's that kind of sadistic sports pain that I love.
Yes.
This year they've collapsed. It's just like, but you thought it's like in December, it was like, this is it. I think we can do it. And then nope. Here's your heart. Let me just grab it and rip it out. And now they're a disaster, and here we are again.
Yeah.
But it's been fun, and I love the relegation. I love the promotion. I love all that. And the other thing that hooked me on the Premier League was I saw a game live for the first time, visiting a friend in London. So it was early 2000s. It's probably 2003. I saw West Ham.
Oh, nice.
Play in their old stadium at Upton Park.
Okay.
Which was just rough and nuts. And I heard language that I'd never heard before in my life. It was just some guy half my size. West Ham scored, and he picked me up next to me, and it was cheering, and we're hugging each other. And I just got I was like, this is fun. I also got into it after the 80s when a lot of it had been cleaned up a lot. Mm-hmm. I mean, in the 90s, I know in the 70s and 80s how with the hooliganism, how bad
that was no joke. Yeah,
no, it was dangerous. And so by the time I got into it in early 2000s, it had been really cleaned up. And I mean, it still could be rough, but so I try to catch a game every time I'm through. So I've seen West Ham. I went to an Arsenal match. I still haven't seen Spurs, but the new stadium looks incredible. But I Arsenal's new stadium I went to.
Okay, you went
beautiful.
to the Emirates, but did you go to the old one, Highbury?
No.
Okay.
No. And then I went some of the smaller teams. I saw Charlton.
Oh, wow.
This last time I went to a QPR match.
Okay.
Which was fun. Yeah, I mean, it's been a lot of fun. I try to see a sporting event in every country I go to. I've seen I went to a cricket match. I tried to give cricket a chance.
Oh, I can't.
It was rough.
I tried.
Man. It was.
Yeah.
It's
horrible.
And if you think baseball's slow, ooh, man. But I really want to see live rugby. But it never seems to be the season every time. Like when I was in South Africa, it wasn't playing, and then same thing in Australia when I was there. New Zealand, I was there in the off season, so I never got a chance to see that. But that seems really fun. That I want to go see live. But yeah, I'll catch a game anywhere I can. I've seen 2 games in Buenos Aires at Boca Juniors, La Bombonera, River Plate, and Boca.
Oh yeah.
I only
That's
saw
the
Boca.
rivalry. Yes.
I saw 2 games at Boca Stadium, and that was crazy. And then I saw a game at the Maracana in Rio.
Wow.
I saw Flamengo play at the Maracana, the world's largest stadium.
Jesus.
So yeah, it was just a fun thing to do.
But you had people with you, right?
In the Maracana, no, I went alone.
Okay.
I saw Besiktas in Istanbul. I went alone.
Wow.
That was rough.
That's brave.
You know what? It wasn't a fun vibe. You know, as dangerous and scary at times like Boca Juniors could be, and that I went with locals.
Mm-hmm.
But that was like a rough vibe too. It's like this could go badly.
Yeah, for sure.
I remember sitting in the Boca Stadium, and above us was the visitor section. And all during the game, this liquid kept coming down, and it might have been beer, might have been something else dripping on the. I don't want to know, but we shared a stairwell going down, and the police kept us in our seats until all the visitors had left and gotten through the stairwell, so we didn't mix in the stairwell and that kind of thing. But in Istanbul, the visitors section had like a fishing net over it and all around it, so people couldn't throw things into the. It was horrible. And then, a lot of most problems in England and a lot of stadiums are all alcohol fueled,
Mm-hmm.
But in Istanbul, I mean, they're mostly all Muslim, and they weren't drinking. They were just angry. I hate to think if alcohol was thrown on that fire.
Ouch. My God.
I mean, they were playing some local team, and they won, and still they still seemed angry in there. I mean, I went through 3 different checkpoints. They had me empty my pockets. I took the change, and because people would throw coins, and
of course,
people were bringing in dead batteries to throw at the players and things like that. And this is not fun, really. I was, I'm glad I went to see it, but it wasn't.
You wouldn't do it again.
The vibe was just not cool,
Jesus.
So that one was kind of rough. But yeah, the Boca one was fun. Rio was great. But the Flamengo, I mean, it was the world's largest stadium. That's where they have the Rock in Rio concerts.
Okay.
When they say the largest rock crowd of ever, they've had the World Cup there.
Yeah, the final was there.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the one they tried to name after Pelé, and the locals just rioted over and protested. But it was maybe a quarter full.
Oh.
So in a stadium that holds over 100,000 people, even 50,000 feels like nothing. It was like cavernous, So it was cool, but it was, not as exciting because it wasn't as intense because it was empty. It was so empty. But I'm sure if it's full, yeah, great. If AC/DC's playing there and it's full,
ouch,
probably rocking, man. During the World Cup, I bet it's great. But
yeah,
but that was cool. But I mean, it's a cool thing to do when I go. And I saw a baseball game in Tokyo.
Wow,
that was fun. That was a lot of fun.
So what was the one difference that stood out for you between Japanese baseball and American baseball?
The level of play I'd say it was about the same as maybe AAA level. It wasn't bad. I mean, it was fine. But the crowd, they had almost cheerleaders. Their cheers were like coordinated.
Okay.
There's a band, and of course, everybody's a lot more well behaved. It's Japan, so
yeah, that's true.
You could eat sushi in your seat, and they had these beer girls that go around little tanks, like coolers on their back, with a little, with just a holster full of cups and then like a nozzle, and they would just fill it up out of this little tank. Whereas here, you would get all individual cans, at your seats.
Oh, okay.
Chicago, you can still get beer served in your seats. They have beer vendors.
Okay.
But in LA, we don't have them.
Ah, okay. I didn't know that.
You have to get up and go. Yeah, you have to get up and go to the counter.
Okay.
I guess maybe it's a form of crowd control. And I remember when I tried to take a beer to my seat in England, they're like, nope, because they don't serve any alcohol in your seats because people wouldn't stop drinking.
I didn't know that either. Okay.
Yeah. I remember when I went to the West Ham game, the guy next to me, he had, the English guy was like a season ticket holder. He had been to one game in America, like an NFL football game. And the two things he couldn't get over were the fact that you could get beer in your seat. You could just sit in your seat and drink beer the whole time and never stop. And then the fact that fans were mixed, like visitor fans could sit next to one another, which is unheard of there. There's always a visitor section that's separate, and that's true throughout most of the world. But yeah, the intensity of it is
something else.
It's pretty fun. But you learn about the history through it. It's like, why do you guys hate each other so much? And you realize it goes back to 100 years. Oh, they were, the owners, that was their team, and we were the workers' team. And this is, it has to do with class and your neighborhood and where you're from. And it's not just about the football. It's deeper.
Yes.
Or that was the Kings team, and we were the opposition party's team. And okay, I'm just here to
enjoy the game.
Yeah, have a good time. Yeah, but just don't hit me if things get flying.
Yeah, it goes. It's crazy how things go beyond what's happening on the field. There are hundreds of years of resentment sometimes.
Yeah, don't kid yourself and think that these riots is over this weekend at Manchester United about the Super League thing or just about football. It's about globalization. I think there's a Brexit vibe to it.
That's true.
These are people that they've seen a lot of their economy go, whether it's jobs getting sent overseas or foreigners coming into, like in the last election, hold the build the wall thing. Having traveled, and I had been through Europe the last 10 years or so, 15 years, I saw this right-wing wave move across it for the last 10 years. And I've been telling people here, just like, hey, man, and all of it is immigrant fueled. Yeah. Because of all these mostly Muslim and Middle Eastern and African immigrants going into Europe.
Yes.
And the response is, kick them out.
Yeah, far right striking back.
Right. And if you're out of a job or something, you got to blame somebody, and they're the easiest target, and they've always have been.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's, I wasn't surprised at any of this. I mean, people were like, oh, right before, I remember when Brexit talk was happening, and I was talking to all my friends in England, and I was like, is this thing going to happen? And they were like, there's no way. It's not going to happen. It's ridiculous. And then it happened. And I was on that trip that cruise trip that I was in Amsterdam. So after my whole traveling through, I went back to Amsterdam for 2 days before I got the flight back home. And I was in Amsterdam when that vote, the morning after the Brexit vote. And it was huge. I mean, certainly the Dutch didn't expect it to happen. And most of Europe didn't think it was going to happen.
We didn't.
And so it was a big deal. They were going, are we next? Are we going to pull out? Is this thing going to hold? And they're still asking those questions. If the biggest, richest member pulls out, that's a big blow to your union. Now you got Germany kind of like pulling the reins on things. And but that's a response to it. We don't want, it's nationalism.
Yeah, but like Great Britain is an island, so it's isolated anyway. So like I'm not worried for the long-term future of the union, personally, the European Union.
Right.
Maybe I'm naive.
But it's weaker with them out of it.
Yes, that's true. But with import duty, taxes being applied to British citizens, maybe that will be a warning to the rest of Europe. If you think about leaving, that's where it's going to hit you in the wallet. Yeah,
there's got to be some kind of, well, the craziest part is going to be Northern Ireland and that border. Yes. I mean, I can't imagine the complications and I don't know. They didn't really think this thing through. But anyway, that happened like 6 months before our election here. And it was the same vibe, before Trump got elected. My friends out here and in most of the cities, they'd be like, "There's no way it can happen. That's ridiculous. He's not going to win. No, it's not going to." And my friends from other countries are like, "Is this Trump thing going to happen?" And I'm like, "Hey, my friends here don't think it are, but I've seen this. It's like it can absolutely." And I would tell my friends here, and especially if you're a road comic, if you play, I was on cruises long enough in that crowd. I heard what I was hearing, what they were saying, and it was completely different than what my friends in Hollywood were saying. It's like you guys are in two different worlds.
Yeah.
And I don't think and the way the system's set up, it could absolutely happen. And my friends were still in denial up to the actual election night. They were like, even after it happened, they were in denial, I think. And then it was like, oh, yeah. But I was primed for it, having been around the world a little bit. I'm going, oh, these things can happen. Just build the wall and Brexit are two sides of the same coin,
Yes.
It's blaming immigrants for your troubles.
And you guys still got 4 years of Trump, and it still went to the wire.
Oh, yeah.
In the last election. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I don't doubt that, the Democrats will probably lose the Senate and lose their majority in the midterms. So, nothing surprises me anymore. I mean, look at the way the system's set up. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. I try not to get too negative on this stuff, but I mean, it's like, if you're going through Europe, the first time I left the country was out of university. I did that blew my mind wide open. I had never been out of the U.S. till I was 21.
Mm-hmm.
And then after college, I did the whole backpacking 6 weeks around Europe, and that was it. That was like, then I wanted to see the world.
That's where you got
it blew my head open.
Okay.
But, so they were talking the summer of 89. So now I tell people, it's like first time I went to Europe, and this is just in my lifetime, this was 30 years ago, there was 2 Germanys, there was a Czechoslovakia, there was Yugoslavia, there was a Soviet Union. I had to change money in every country. There was no euro. I had to go get Swiss francs, and then I had to get, pesos, and then I had to get, Deutschmarks. What a pain in the ass.
Oh, yeah.
And lira. I had lira, and I had all this stuff. I went through Checkpoint Charlie. I was there the last summer of the Berlin Wall.
Wow.
And it was wild. And I said, these borders change all the time. Countries change all the time. And you traveling, you see the history, going to Turkey and learning about the Ottoman Empire, and going to Peru and see the Incan Empire and all this stuff.
Yes.
And now we have an empire, and they all end. The Brits had one, the Spanish had one, the Romans. It's like, why do they have this great wine in Croatia? And so, because the Romans owned all this. They had it all. They ruled it, everything. And then they didn't. And then one day they didn't.
Yeah.
So it just kind of like, I remember Americans are always fascinated about the age of things,
mm-hmm.
And that's why they love castles and stuff, because nothing here is old.
That's true.
Anything older than a few hundred years was, native, and we wiped it out. And it's the same problem. I love going to Australia and stuff, but it's the same story. Anything older than a couple hundred years was Aborigine, and it's been decimated. It's been erased almost. There's no old castles to look at or nothing like that. But so when Americans go to Europe, they see something that's, they go to the Colosseum and like, oh my God, wow. But you realize history, then you get a sense of history. You're like, oh, this stuff, it ebbs and it flows. At one time you're here, you're not. The Romans went all the way into Britain, and then they weren't.
Yeah. And
they leave behind an alphabet and, running water or indoor plumbing or whatever they bring.
Yes.
And a monetary system and things like that. And Americans go around, we leave hamburgers and rock and roll and some other things, and then you leave. I don't know how, maybe these things aren't meant to last, I mean, borders change all the time. I remember going through a castle in Germany, and I remember asking the guide, how long did the family who lived here run all these lands? I mean, how long did they rule here? And she said, well, about 450 years. I was like, okay, America's what, 240?
Yeah.
So 400 and something years when you were lucky, at a time when you were lucky to live to 40.
Yes.
How many generations is that? They probably thought it was going to be that way forever. And then one day, it isn't.
it's still impressive that they lasted that long.
Yeah. Yeah.
To be honest.
I mean, I went to Romania a couple of years ago, and just to see how the ebbs and flows. They had a king, and then they didn't, and then they went through, the Ceausescu years and communism, and then that ended, and now there's still a lot of those people still in government, and it's weird. It's weird, and it just kind of ebbs and look at Russian history. Look at,
Yeah.
they've seen it all. In America, we're just new. That's it. This is all a big test. This is all a big experiment. And I say America couldn't even make it 100 years before having a civil war that nearly ended it all.
That's true.
We weren't even 100 years old, and it almost got ripped apart then.
That's true.
So older countries look at us and go, oh, that's adorable. What are you, 240? Oh, you only had the one civil war? Oh, you had a wannabe fascist dictator? Oh, just the one? We've had 10 of them. And so, yeah, they've seen it all, and we're just experiencing all. We're like that unreally spoiled teenager. It's like experiencing everything for the first time, so it's so dramatic, and we overly, I don't know. I that's what I think. It's just like a perspective. That's one thing travel gives you, and just like, oh yeah, we're just a small part of it.
Yeah, and we have it so easy. Like, we are both white male from the Western Hemisphere. Yeah. We've won the game.
Yeah, and I get a sense of like the luck, and it's all a luck of the draw. We were born in
for sure.
And these were like, oh, this is my country. Your mom squeezed you out in between these borders, and you have no idea what kind of an advantage.
That's it.
That is, my grandfather came here on a boat from Odessa, and didn't have anything. Spoke Russian and didn't, and because he was going to die if they stayed. They were Jewish immigrants. They came, and they were getting chased out of all those things. He ended up in Ellis Island, and it's just like, it's luck that he came, but I thank God he did. But we could have stayed, and I could be in in the Ukraine now, and my life would have been very different. I met great people around the world. They live in incredible poverty, and they didn't do anything. They're good people who work hard, and they're just born in a poor place, and they don't have a tenth of the opportunity. So I remember just the last flight I took was in January 25th of 2020. So that was it. So the last ship I did let me off in Curacao, down in the Caribbean. And I had never been to Colombia. It was on my list. So I said, hey, can I, I'll find my own way back. If you fly me, instead of flying me back to LA, can you fly me to Medellin, Colombia, as they, and they're like, yeah, okay. So they just flew me to Medellin, and I just flew myself home like a week later. I said, I'm going to spend a week in Colombia. But I remember a girl I met there, one of my guides, she's like a young student. She's like a university student. And it's like, oh, you're so lucky you can travel anywhere you want. She's never been to America, but she wanted to go. But for Colombians, it's not so easy. I mean, they got to get a visa. It was we just take it for granted. We'll just get on a plane and go, and they'll let us in. They're like, oh no, they're not big on letting Colombians just show up, because of the drug, ever since the 80s and things, it's not easy, and I've had friends with like Thai girlfriends or something, and why they try to bring them over, and it's really, really hard, through like history of like child brides and all, or mail order things. And to have the freedom up until, recently, the American passport was the most valuable one in the world. Yes. Singapore, I think, just passed us, but certainly not now. Since COVID, forget. I mean, now we're seeing how much I took for granted. And I'm glad I took, so many Americans are just, you're born with this gift. They handed you the most valuable passport, and so many of them don't use it. They don't even go anywhere. And
that's true.
They would be best served to. And, there's this knee-jerk reaction. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why Americans don't travel, but lack of vacation time, such a massive country that, you can get every terrain, any kind of climate, in one country. That's rare. I mean, look, I'm basically an immigrant. I moved to one coast, 1,000 miles from where I grew up, which in most countries, you move 1,000 miles from where you grew up, you're in another country.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I moved 3,000 miles to a different coast, 3 time zones, to a different climate zone, to a desert, to a, you can, and I never had to get a work visa or a green card or learn a new language or anything like that.
That's true.
That is an incredible advantage that Americans don't realize how lucky that is. If you grew up in crap weather and want to live in warm weather, you never have to leave the country. Whereas you grow up in the UK, you want to see the sunshine. Well, brother, you better leave the country, and
Yes.
figure out. And that's why the EU was such a nice thing. They didn't have to get a work visa to go and
That's true.
to move that way. But now I guess they will.
And just the freedom of speech and the free media and all that. Like in China, for example, if you talk against the government, they're going to disappear you.
Yeah, I was I was in Vietnam. I remember I was traveling and I was staying in this place with these 2 Italian guys, and one of them said to me, "Oh, you're so lucky in America. If you want to start a business, you can just start one." And I'm just like, "You live in Italy. You're not like in the third world, kind of." And he was very cynical about it. He was, man, in Italy, if you got to know somebody, if you want to get a bank loan, if you don't have a family name, if you're not connected in some way, and just like between the government and the mob, everybody's going to come for their handout and make it life tough for you. You got to bribe this guy, that guy. It's just there was a lot of hoops. It's a lot of insider, and a lot of the world works that way. In Russia, they say Russia is very corrupt in that way. That unless you're not, you toe the line or you bribe this guy. Once you're done bribing the government officials, then the mob comes for its cut. Now you got to bribe that guy. And it's just like a hassle. So people still keep wanting to do business here because it does kind of work by the book, and they like that. I mean, there's illegal ways to do things in America for sure, but it is still kind of open to anybody. We don't really care where you're from if you make money.
That's true.
For better or for worse. I mean,
That's
it's
true.
open. It's just like in Hollywood and Silicon Valley kind of work that way. Nobody really cares where you went to school. If you got an app that makes $1 billion, then we want to be in business with you. I mean, that's kind of why the Jewish community got in with Hollywood and got a toehold in it, because it was a new business.
Okay.
It was open to them. When you were...
because they were locked out of everything else in Nazi Germany, for example.
I mean, you couldn't go into the railroads or banking back in the east of these blue blood, waspy places. And if you were a Jew, nope, you weren't going to be let into the country club or maybe you work in the back. Where you're not seen, but you're not going to be they weren't going to have a Jew on the board, or you weren't going to rise. You were only going to rise to a certain level.
Okay.
Which is one of the reasons Jews historically would go into business for themselves, because no one would let you. No one would hire you.
Huh.
So you had to learn they learned ever getting shuttled all throughout Europe. They learned how to survive getting moved around a lot. So they were good immigrants. They knew how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You learn how to start a business of your own. If you become, education is important. If you can be a lawyer or a doctor, you can set up your own practice.
Yep.
And you don't have to ask for.
That's true.
So they were very skilled in that. So by the time they came to America at the start of the industrial age, they were very primed to survive. They knew how to do it, kind of, after having been immigrants, as opposed to a lot of like the Italians or the Irish.
Yeah. Okay.
Who are basically peasant farmers and worked the same plot of land for 1,000 years. Well, you took them off that land. They didn't know what to do. In the industrial age, didn't do well for them.
Well, yeah, they were workers, and once you get replaced with a machine.
Yeah. So the Irish tend to become like city workers, the police, firemen, politicians, and that kind of thing. And
I never thought of that.
A lot of the Italians opened restaurants, and they were good in construction, and laborers and that kind of thing. But they kind of went into those businesses. So it was open to kind of thing. So there's a way to be a successful immigrant. Now the Asians here are doing it well. They're doing the same thing that the Jews did back in you keep your family small. Meanwhile, the Irish and Italians are Catholics.
Yes.
And Mexican, and Latinos as well. They're Catholic. They have huge families. Well, it's harder to send 8 kids to college than it is 2. So you very rarely see large, huge Japanese families.
That's true.
They have 2 kids, and they now the joke is like Indians are doing very well here, and the Chinese and the Japanese, and they do very, very well. And they've passed most immigrants way up in terms of wealth, and but also you support one another's businesses, and the Koreans as well. They do really, really well. But so there's a way to do that. But one of the reasons the Jews came out to Hollywood, it was just like it was a new business. They're like moving pictures. These old blue bloods out east is like, you want to make what? Moving pictures? Because that was like saying you wanted to be in the pinball business or like the carnival business. Because that was really like those Nickelodeons that they played at the state fair. It's like, yeah, good luck with that, Jew. And you want to do it where? In California? 3,000 miles away with the Mexicans and the Indians and
in the desert?
Okay. We'll help. We'll pack your bags for you. Good luck with that quote unquote moving picture business. So by the time movies took off, they were already established and kind of, they had the studios and were kind of ingrained into that business. Yeah, but it was open to anybody because it was new. And new businesses, it's like in Silicon Valley, I think kind of works the same way. It's like there wasn't this old boy network of where did you go to school?
Yeah.
Were you in the right? Did you go to, an Ivy League thing? Yeah. Were you in that?
You have the right connections.
Yeah. And a lot of that still exists out in a lot of businesses, out east, or it's banking or Wall Street or that kind of thing. So old businesses were harder to break into. New businesses, hey man, start a business. You got an idea, run. It's open to all. So yeah, that's why it's kind of happened. But now the running gag was always like when I was growing up, it's like, oh, the Jewish doctor, Jewish lawyer, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now you're more likely to see it's like Asian. It's like most of your doctors are mostly Asian and Indian and that kind of thing. It's pretty interesting.
For Indians, the best way out for them is to become a doctor, for example.
Yeah, and engineering too.
Yes,
they really got a lock on the engineering thing, and they're doing great. But it's funny, like it's funny how certain ethnic groups got into certain businesses. Like in New York, like the corner grocer was usually like Korean, or like, your dry cleaner guy was Chinese. The cab drivers were usually like Pakistanis or Africans, and then but yet the hired cars, like the town cars, like those were all Russians. It was really kind of it was fascinating to see. Yeah, and I guess I think I heard 75% of small independently owned motels in America are Indian.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay, didn't know that.
And convenience stores tend to be Indian or Pakistani, and that kind of 7-Elevens and that running gag.
Yeah.
But
that's true.
There's a lot to it. It's really because certain families get in, and then they have they bring their families in, and that's a way to get in. Yeah. It's interesting. The parking lot business here, the paid parking lots in LA tend to be a lot of Ethiopians and Somali. It's I don't know why. Maybe one guy bought a business and brought in more, but all of a sudden working the booth, it's just, why are so many East Africans working these paid parking lot attendants? It's really weird, but fascinating. But,
those stereotypes,
they come from somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. I mean, my grandparents who lived because my mom's family was not Jewish. They were completely old school, Connecticut Yankee.
Okay.
I mean, they had a mixed marriage, and my mom's parents, that one was Irish and one was Catholic or Protestant. One was Catholic, one was Protestant. That was a big deal in the 20s.
Yes.
Because my grandfather's family was came over on the Mayflower, kind of really wild, Protestant. And he married an Irish girl. Ooh. And then my mom comes home with some Jewish kid, and it's oh, nothing matters anymore. And then my one aunt married a Cuban, so we're all, very American kind of thing, and not very religious. So I guess very American in that way. Although, compared to places like Canada or Australia, and, I forget how religious America is. You see it as an outsider. It's pretty shocking, but you go you forget. It's very religious in America.
Yeah, because here no one cares, literally.
Yeah. There's a reason the Puritans were kicked out of every decent country in Europe and ended up here. They're like, yeah, take that stuff to the new world there.
Yeah.
You're there early to bed, early to rise crap. Okay, yeah, fine.
There might be something to that. Yes.
Yeah. No, they were Puritans. Ugh. Yeah, take your belt buckle hat and go over there and deal with in the new world.
You won't be missed.
They were extreme, you know.
Yeah. I have a very important travel question for you.
Okay.
On the plane, do you recline your seat or not?
I try not to. On a long flight, it's going to be hard.
Yes.
But I certainly don't. I don't do it quickly if I do it.
Yes, good point. Yes.
You do it slowly. But I will try not to. But I do recline to some point, especially if it's like a red eye and it's an overnight flight or something. You got to try a little. And I also sometimes I'll ask the person behind me, do you mind?
Exactly. I do that, and I do it halfway. But if it's like 2 hours or less, I won't touch my seat.
That's good.
And another thing, Ryanair, I noticed that pretty quickly. They don't recline.
No.
That's awesome. They solved the problem. You know, there's not going to be any argument with people over, nothing of that. They solved the problem at the source.
Ryanair.
Love that.
Oh, they're so bad.
Yeah, they are. But I like the fact that they took the problem out of the entire equation.
Yeah.
Your flight is going to suck, but not for that reason.
Well, the reason, it's going to suck in every way. But the reason they don't recline is so they could cram more seats closer together, and there's no risk of going. That's how close they are and how little legroom you have.
That's true.
Yeah, that is a Greyhound bus in the sky.
That's true. But gotta be honest, I miss it in a way.
Oh, really? Well, take Spirit Air here. That's our version of Ryanair. Spirit, have you ever flown them? Oof,
I've heard of them, but never tried them.
In Ryanair's defense, they're great for anything under, like you said, under 2 hours.
Yes.
And if you have no luggage.
Yes. Yeah.
Because they will literally measure your bag and weigh it to the ounce.
That's true.
And if you are over, that's an extra $50. If you don't print your ticket out, they will nickel and dime you. You have to print your ticket out.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't have a printer, tough, because that's an extra charge. You have to do everything by or you will, that $25 fare has now become $100.
Yes. Oh yeah, for sure. But like from Berlin to Milan, for example.
Oh yeah.
Perfect. For a weekend. Awesome.
Yeah, for a weekend. And you have a carry-on backpack. It's great. Or going from Dublin to London or something. But I had a flight, the last flight I took, speaking of Portugal, the last time I flew from Faro, Portugal to Luton Airport.
Oh, okay.
I was flying Monarch Air, something. It was a UK airline.
Okay.
It went out of business on my way to the airport. They literally, or the night before, they went out of business. And these bastards were taking money from people, like booking flights right up to the end. I mean, just pricks.
Wow.
And I got to the airport and there was a Monarch Air sign and like they had taped a piece of paper over it and just said closed or something. Please go to this window.
Oh, wow.
And they had stranded people all over Europe and they went out of business. And it turns out, and so the UK government stepped in and paid all these other airlines to get people home.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out, and it turned out I was only delayed like an hour or two, and they got me home. I flew something called like Titan Airlines or something showed up.
Okay.
And we got herded into this one. But I found out later I was part of the biggest airlift for the UK did since World War II.
Holy shit.
Because, I got to hand it to government. They stood up for that one and they got us all home, because a lot of people lost money. Their plans, people had wedding plans ruined and stuff.
Oh.
This airline went out of business just
overnight.
Wow. And so that was a new experience for me. Of all of my flights, I never had a airline go out of business while I was going to the airport. That was weird.
Yeah, that's pretty. When it comes to timing, that's hard to beat.
Man, no, that was wild. I thought I was going to be stranded. I really thought, if that happened in America, I can't see the government stepping in, and I would have been stranded. They're like, tough luck.
But there are worse places to be stranded in.
Oh yeah. It wasn't.
Faro is super nice.
Oh yeah, no, it's beautiful. The Algarve is great. I could have been stranded in the Lagos, Nigeria airport where I was stranded for 9-10 hours once. And that I don't recommend that to anybody.
Jesus.
Yeah, that one was bad.
Yeah.
That was a rough one.
That's probably not ideal.
No, it was brutal.
Okay, so that's the end of part 1. Mike, will you be able to join us for part 2?
Oh, despite my busy schedule, yes, I will.
All right. Looking forward to it.
No, it's fun. I hope as long as the people enjoy it and they don't write you in protest and say, don't have this guy on again. I'll come back. Yeah, it's fun.
It's not going to be a problem at all. So we will talk to you again in part 2 in a couple of weeks. Thanks.
Au revoir.
Au revoir tout le monde.